Welcome to a new Paradigm of Education podcast. I'm your host, Monique Sayers. Today we have a very special guest with us. Her name is Clare Ford. Before I go and introduce Clare, I'd just like to introduce what the podcast is for people who are first listening for the first time. So a new paradigm of education is an awakening in education. It's not simply just showing up every day to educate your child in the best way. It's more than that. It's holding hands with different kinds of educators. A new paradigm, you might see, mainstream school teachers mixed with homeschool parents, mixed with business owners, mixed with a whole range of people. We're all here basically to collaborate and co-create what we believe is the fruit of a new paradigm of education. And it's completely different from what it has been in the past. It's not, and there's some small stepping stones that people are taking along the way. And what I'm really loving is that in our community of a new paradigm of education is that we get to collaborate with a whole bunch of different amazing people. And Clare Ford is definitely one of those. She herself is an expert educator. I'll just go through all about Clare. So she's also a parent. She's an international author, a speaker, a coach, a healer, as well as a tutor. And she also has created her own academy, which is called Switched On Learners, which allows students to access their natural gifts, abilities, and talents to discover their true potential. So as a founder of the Switched On Academy, she's an expert educator with over 20 years experience. So she combines her unique skill set using the Switched On method, which I can't wait to hear all about, to unlock the brilliance in any child, tween, or teen, which is amazing because, having that connection and being able to switch on students and feel their brilliance is just so necessary. So go ahead and just introduce yourself a bit more, Clare, and let us know about yourself too. Thank you for coming on today.
Thank you so much, Monique. It is a pleasure to be here. And I think, speaking into the new paradigm of education, I'm going to kind of start off with the antithesis, if you like, with the wrong old paradigm of education, because the reason I'm here is because that system didn't work. And I think it's really useful for people to hear that, not just from the perspective of their child. Like, obviously, many people are taking their kids out of school or world schooling or forest schooling because they found something that hasn't fit. But the reason I'm here is because I once was a school teacher for many years, but for over 12 years in mainstream schooling. And I actually ended up getting burnt out, depressed, anxious, actually suicidal, and I needed a 2-year recovery, right, to recover from being in mainstream education as a teacher. Now, I left that thinking I could never teach. I wasn't a good teacher, even though Ofsted were giving me, good and excellent and all of this. I came away like such a shell of a person, thinking I would never teach again. And actually, when I was growing my coaching business, which originally was about parenting, mastering mindset in parenting and pregnancy, I tutored on the side to grow my business, right? And the thing was, I used to be embarrassed to say that I was a teacher. I used to be embarrassed to say, that I can get these results for kids. Like, that was almost like a dirty secret, just something I did on the side, right? And what happened in the pandemic, and this is what's exciting for me, and speaking into what you're saying, where, we combine parenting, entrepreneurship, and pedagogy, is that I basically had a knock from the universe on one of my walks, right? I got a bit of a download. Well, it wasn't it was like a knock on the back of my head. And, this was the universe talking to me saying, Clare, you have to step into this education space. There are so many people struggling with this right now. You have this experience, you have these things at your fingertips to share. You need to do this. And I was still kind of like suffering from PTSD, right? I'm like, there's no way I'm going back into teaching, right? Forget it, right? I was literally this angry with this other voice, And I went on another walk another day, and lo and behold, they knocked harder and louder. I said, no, this is actually your calling. You have to do this. And so that's when I came back into the education space, although I'd been dabbling under the radar. But if you like, it's when I put my stake in the sand and actually owned for the first time, from a heartfelt, soul-led space, owned the fact that I am an educator, I'm an academic coach, and I'm also a light worker. And so I'm bringing that into education, without apology, without hiding, saying I can raise the vibration of our next generation. I can support our young learners and our teens who are struggling right now. And I can bring the pieces of the puzzle, my healing, my teaching, my coaching, my parenting. I'm allowed now to bring all those pieces of the puzzle together by not being in mainstream education. So I just kind of wanted to share that with you so that you can see a little tiny bit of my journey and why I'm so passionate about it now, but how it almost broke me in the past.
Thank you so much. I can feel that. And maybe you could see the tears in my eyes. The people on the podcast can't see it, but I could really feel Claire's heart and soul with that. And I really align with what you're saying. And I really feel your energy has got that stake in the stand of being an educator. And it is really a gift and a calling. And it's not something that's that we all don't have within us. So my message also back to everybody else who's listening is all of the parents out there, or anybody who doesn't even have children but wants to support our children, if that's your gift and your calling, go for it, because there's just so much need. There's so much need out there for our children to really change this face of education in just so many different ways. And I also really love what you shared about your reflection around anxiety as well. In our book, A New Paradigm of Education, my chapter starts off with that part of myself as well, that I was really, really unconfident and anxious, and a lot of just stuff was just not happening in terms of the classroom. And I just was like, you know what, I think I'm meant to be doing this, but what's going on, And actually my own personal journey of my own healing and my own awakening completely transformed myself as an educator and the way that children are reflecting back to me as well. So I really, really resonate with you. And I'm sure so many people out there are also really resonating as well, whether you're a parent or an educator or just somebody who wants to help our next generation. Not that they need help. They don't need help. I think it's we that need the help, right? They're already perfect. So
yeah, they certainly don't need fixing either. This is the thing. I think that our language can trap us into thinking, especially when we've got children with SEN or on the spectrum or on the this or off the that or whatever it is, and we kind of find a way to fix them. There's no fixing that's needed, right? It's the system that's broken, not the children. The children do not need fixing. We need to find different ways to relate to them and bring out that genius. That's all that needs to happen.
Yeah, totally. And I feel that leads into perhaps what Switched On is all about. Would you share more about that? I can feel that energy relates to what you've just shared, and I can't wait to hear about it.
Yeah, sure. So the reason I called my academy Switched On was because parents were coming to me, during the pandemic, basically saying how their kids were switched off education, right? How, oh my gosh, we've got this work home from school and it's so boring, they've done it already, or I can't get them to be motivated because obviously, it's not relevant, they don't understand it, or the parents don't understand it. And so I was like, okay, there's lots of young people, well, and families actually, the parents too, who are really switched off education. What is going on? What is it that has been lost, right, in this journey of learning and discovery? And so I came to, thought about this long and hard and came up with my own methodology, which I use to basically switch learners back on. And it's like, come on, guys, right? We can do this. And it can be sometimes very simple examples that I give people. And they're like, oh, I never thought of that. Because sometimes the simplest things are the most effective things. It doesn't have to be overly complicated and, difficult to remember and difficult to put into practice. It has to be something that's quick and easy and fun. And then people are like switched on again. So that's why I called my academy Switched On. And I basically have three pillars to my learning method, which I discovered when I got amazing results for kids during lockdown in micro timing. For example, I got children from all around the world to work with me, and they each wrote their own book in just a week, right? And people are going, how can you do this? They're different ages, different creeds, colors, nationalities, backgrounds, abilities, don't know each other. Like, no teacher in their right mind would kind of take on this kind of a challenge. which I did, of course. And so I thought, well, what is it that made that successful? Let me dig down into if there's something that I can use again and again and again to create the same kind of successes. And so I came up with this teaching methodology, the switched on learning method, which has these 3 pillars. And the first one, I'm sure is no surprise to anyone, is clarity, right? We have to get clear on not just what we're learning. That's not the most important question. We have to get clear on why we're learning it. And this is where normally at school we fall at the first hurdle, because I remember when I used to ask, well, why am I learning this? And my mum would just say, because I say so. And it's like, well, that's not a good enough reason. So then, as a parent, you bring out the big guns and say, well, your teacher wants you to learn it. Well, that's not really good enough reason either. So then you have to go even further, go, well, the head teacher or the governors want you to learn it. Kids can't be bothered with that. So he's like, well, the government wants you to learn it. If you don't go into school to learn it, we'll be put into prison. It's against the law, right? And so this is crazy. These are not good enough reasons for why children should learn anything. They're not good enough reasons. We don't need to learn something because other people are telling us that's what we need to learn. So we have to get that clarity piece right. We have to dig into that internal motivation and drive of why something is even worth spending your time and effort and energy learning in the first place. And if we can't get that question right, well, then we just stop the conversation there and go to the park, right?
Yeah, totally.
So when we get the why right, then we can go on to the next piece, which for me is curiosity. And what I've discovered is a way to switch learning back on is to help to stimulate curiosity and to provide that space for curious questions to be asked. Because there's nothing that breaks my heart more than a child who's come from a school environment and is now too afraid to ask questions. I was working with one boy once. I'll give you a very quick example if we've got time, Monique. And he came to me once. We were working to get his 11 plus done. And he came to me and he was in a real grump, right? This boy, he was about 9 or 10, no, it was 10 he was. I'm like, okay, what's the matter with you? And he was really soft. He's like, oh. I was like, come on, tell me. And he said, well, I asked a question at school and my teacher didn't answer it. I'm like, okay, teachers are busy. They don't have time to answer everything. What was the question? And he was asking, he wanted to know about the Big Bang Theory and how the world was created, which is an awesome question, of course, but not necessarily a question that every adult has time to answer when it's asked, right? So I said, well, that's amazing. I said, that's incredible. I've just created something in the quantum curriculum, which is all to do with how the world began, right? And I'm thinking, oh, this is so aligned. And so I was really excited about this question. Now, the teacher didn't answer it because she was probably doing 100 other things. And as a result, she made this poor boy feel that his question wasn't valid. And so a few months down the line, when we were working on something else and we were doing, I don't know, brochures or something, information brochures. And I'm like, well, what do you want to learn about? What do you want to find out about? Or what do you want to tell me about in your information brochure? How can we learn something new? And he went, oh, I don't really want to find out about anything. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, what about how the earth was created? He said, no, I'm not interested in that. I said, well, what else are you interested in? He said, I don't really know. He said, I can't be bothered to ask any questions into Google. And so that spark was literally blown out by that teacher, not necessarily because she meant to, but just that happened to that boy. And that spark, that curiosity disappeared. And how tragic is that if that is happening to our young people? Basically, that means that humanity has not got a future ahead of it. Because if people hadn't been asking intelligent and curious questions, we wouldn't have developed the products and the amazing technology that we're used to nowadays. And so this boy might be a future young inventor, He might be the kind of person that's asking curious questions about how else could we get to space, or how else could aliens send us a message, right? And now he doesn't bother to ask any questions anymore at the age of 10. that is criminal.
Yeah, I know. Wow, that's unbelievable. And I'd love to hear the final pillar, but I feel like curiosity is definitely one of the key principles of activation of learning. And in the new paradigm, a lot of the authors that I was working with as well, we were all just feeling into that place of love, and then that place of love creates the curiosity and the desire to be learning. So I can see that by having that shut down, it's just shut down all of him and, you know, other children as well going through this. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, it's so important. And, you know, so to cultivate that curiosity, you know, we just have to allow space for questioning, and we have to allow ourselves as adults some compassion as well, and to know it's okay to not know the answer. This is something that I talk to parents a lot about, going on this shoulder to shoulder approach through the learning journey, that you don't have to be the one leading and having all the answers. You know, you can have something like a curiosity jar and you say, well, that's a great question. We don't have time to look at it right now. Put it in the curiosity jar. And when we have time, let's take out one of our curious questions and go on this journey of exploration together to figure out what some of the answers might be.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that idea to use in your home or in the schools. And it also reminds me of the old paradigm where even as a teacher, we needed to know it all, you know, standing out the front of a classroom. I need to know everything. I'm the teacher. And that's just, we all know that's the old paradigm. And, you know, as a parent, we kind of wing it, like we're just sort of winging it. And I feel like as an educator now, that's what I'm doing. I'm just showing up and I'm feeling energy of children, looking into what they need. What are they curious about? Okay, let's go from that place. And I'm so grateful that you're encouraging parents to bring this practice into their homes and other educators to play with that as well, because it really is a key for the new paradigm, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. And so the third pillar, and you know, you'll know this in your heart, Monique. My third pillar is, of course, you know, that connection, that collaboration piece. You know, that it's not just, you know, it's not just teacher child. It's, you know, it's got to be the family on board, the child on board, the educator on board. You know, but actually more than that, you know, it's our whole communities. You know, I know people have used, you know, it takes a village to raise a child. People have said that so much, but it really is that. It's the fact that, you know, learning is a collaborative, it's a collaborative thing. You know, you can have a lone wolf, like somebody who likes to study on their own. I don't mean it in that way, but I just mean that we learn from each other. We learn, we can learn as a group, we can collaborate as adults to provide the best kind of opportunities and learning journeys for our young people. And so, you know, that collaborative element has to be there, in my opinion.
Yeah, 100%. That's, I believe, is also the key of the new paradigm is collaboration, because that space of going it alone, it feels harder. Like there's just so many resources we can use. And the biggest resource as well, I found, is using that resource from within. So what you were sharing around, first, am I regulated? How am I? And then from there, okay, how can I connect? How can I use different like collaborative people like yourself? Like, how could Claire support me? How could Monique support me? How could I support my children? How could we support each other? It's definitely necessary. And that's what's so exciting about this new paradigm, is that it's not one size fits all. It's like, really, there's just no set path. And I feel like another message that's coming through what you're sharing is the more that people are able to kind of just let go and to trust that what they're doing is okay, that this is the paradigm in itself, that it doesn't have to be a perfect mold. It doesn't have to be a perfect way. All of that is done. And I also feel that's what the pandemic has showed us, you know, like, you know, all of a sudden just things were just swept beyond us, that, you know, taken away. And it's like, okay, well, what's left? What is there left? And curiosity can always be there, right? It's not something that has to go.
No,
So
that's right. That curiosity. And, you know, and I think that people found a different way to connect. You know, during the pandemic, so many things were taken for granted. And actually, you know, we were given opportunities online to collaborate with people all around the world that we wouldn't necessarily have thought of beforehand. And even families and friends had to make an effort to connect with the people they wanted to connect with and to show up right, at a given time, and to hold that space, because you couldn't just drop in for a cup of tea. Do you know what I mean? You had to organize it, right? Bring your tea to Zoom and you have your cup of tea together, but you had to be there at that same time. And so I think it did make people realize really about how to feel connected with people when you're not in that same physical space. And I think that that was a real opening. I personally think that that was a gift of the pandemic in a way.
Oh, I 100% agree. And all the different births of different companies and people's creation and people stepping into that place of curiosity, adults stepping into that place of curiosity themselves, like what can I do now in the world, and how can I be that to be able to support then my child, and us then sort of being that place of inspiration. It's amazing. I'm really grateful for that as well. I'd love to ask you too, I have a special interest in quantum learning, so I'd love to know a little bit about what you do that in the Switched On Academy, or just anything around quantum learning for kids. If you could share that would be amazing.
Yeah, sure. So really it's about allowing children to, my main mission is about allowing children to become fully self-expressed. And I feel that certainly for me as a child, and growing up as quite a spiritual, empathic person, that was truncated in school, right? I felt like those bits were cut off and I had to fit in the box and be a certain energy and perform in a certain way. And so for me, really in my kind of way of doing quantum, it's about allowing children to express themselves in different ways. And it's about allowing them to go on that journey of curiosity, to say it's okay to ask about, people in different planets and different universes. It's okay to ask about different timelines and timeline collapse. It's okay to ask about fairies and angels and this kind of thing, because actually what I'm finding is that the children don't really need the lessons. They all actually know this stuff anyway. It's the parents and the adults and the educators that need to be given permission in a way to remember what the children already know. And so it's really easy to teach them about this stuff because they haven't learned that it's not okay to know it. And so they're just like, oh yeah, okay, sure, yeah, I talk to fairies, or I can relate to being a mermaid, or whatever it is, right? And so we do things like unlocking your superpowers, which is all about intuition and sixth senses and things like that. I call it names that parents will understand, but the content is what the children understand, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally makes sense. I've actually seen one of your presentations, Claire, for children in our quantum magic school for kids that we're both a part of as well, which is another great platform for children to learn quantum. There's so many different ways that they can do it. And yeah, it was brilliant what you presented in there. I can see it's beautiful for the children to be able to do that. And I'm imagining what's in your academy is amazing as well. I'd love to also see that. Do you have anything that you offer parents, or like resources or things that parents could look at that you can support them with? It doesn't have to be quantum, but it could just be with other types of learning. I know that a lot of parents would really like to know that, probably educators as well.
Yeah, so in the Switched On Academy, there's a tab which just says free on the top, and there's loads of free resources. In fact, I was creating quite a lot during lockdown, and so I've now got it into what you can read, what you can see, and what you can hear. So there's a few blogs in there, there's a few podcasts in there, and there's a few video trainings in there, which can help people from really practical things like, how do I plan the week ahead if I'm homeschooling my children, topic-based learning and all of that, to things around meditation, well-being, mindfulness. I did a training just the other day about helping children manage exam anxiety, but of course, so that's the really grounded kind of 3D. And then within that, there's the breath work and, emotional regulation, and also actually future pacing and visioning the outcome that you want. So this seems to be kind of how I start, with the kind of 3D pain point that everybody understands. And then it's almost like I weave in the magical bits along the way.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And it always changes depending on who we're connecting with anyway, what they need, what kind of little bit of magic is needed. So I totally hear you on that aspect. I also have an interest in your book, the Rainbows and Lollipops book.
Oh,
It just
yeah.
seems like really brilliant. Like I'm really inspired that you actually brought this to life, and teaching literacy with soul. Like soul is like one of my favorite words. So could you tell me
Yeah.
about this project and the kids? Because the kids, they are the paradigm and we're here for them, right?
Oh,
You know?
yeah. So this was such an exciting adventure. So this was in the first year of lockdown when the kids were coming to me switched off and the parents were like so cross and they're like, why are we doing fronted adverbials? And my kid doesn't remember anything and we don't know about grammar. And, you know, they start a story and can't finish it and all of this. There was all this like going on. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to create this writing course to help children to write a story in a week. And I had already started in, on a book a few years before, which was downloaded to me about, I had this concept for this book and I didn't understand where it fit. And then suddenly I was on this course with the children that I was facilitating. And I said, do you know what? Because of my shoulder to shoulder approach, and because of I consider that I learn from the children, I said, I'm going to write our book at the same time as I'm teaching you to write your books. And your books are going to be part of the big book, right? So we've got all the children's stories in here, as well as some of my own, with beautiful little illustrations. They've got their stories in here, which they've illustrated all different kinds of things. And then I thought, well, during lockdown, parents need to know, or they've been asking me, how do I teach my child to write? So I thought, okay, this is also going to be a resource for parents. So at the back of the book, in very typical teacher fashion, I've got a, how to, right? So what we're looking for example, in recipes, there's a little tick box. And then underneath, there's examples of exactly that. So say you were trying to teach your child to write, whatever it was, a diary entry. And I've said, we're looking for an informal tone. You can then find that exactly what that looks like and try to replicate it in your child's writing at home. So it's very practical. But then, because I have to weave the magic, because I'm an alchemist and a light worker, that all on itself was okay, but not quite enough. So what this book also does is it goes up through our energetic centers, and the chapters are written with different chakras in mind. So it starts off with our, I've even put the contents here in red and then orange and yellow and green, right, as it goes up through. So it starts off with a story that's actually very grounded about the earth and about nature and about connecting with nature. And then our last story is a prayer to the universe. So it's right up here, you see. So people don't need to know that unless they get that. But as you go through the book, what's happening is that actually you're unlocking your different energetic centers as well. So that's one little part of it. And then at the end of each of the chapters, so I thought, well, not all children like to read and not all children like to write. So at the end of the chapters, we have some curious questions, of course, to ask about the story. We also have some aligned actions that people can take, which is maybe about sketching or drawing or acting something out or creating music or dressing up as something. So it's not to do with writing, but it's to do with the message in the story. And then at the end of each story is a magical meditation. So there's that time to sit and relax and for the parent and child to share that experience together. And that's why it's teaching literacy with soul.
Wow, that's amazing. I really love that. If you can hear my little daughter in the background, she's just talking in the background. Maybe she's doing light language. That lit me up so much hearing that expression of yourself. Like it's amazing. All the energy of the chakras and then all these little extra woven bits, and it's how useful is that? And it's helpful for the children. It's in giving them a voice. It's also giving practical tips for parents and the children. What an amazing creative process that is. Wow.
And what's lovely is that you know, if you've got a child at home who's, you know, a reluctant writer, for want of a better word, you know, and they're 8 years old or 9 years or whatever, oh, I can't do that, you know, that's for big children. Well, no, you just show them one of the stories in here that's written by an 8-year-old, and you can say, well, this person did it, there's no reason why you can't do it.
Totally, 100%. I love that. I just love the whole magic, the inspiration that it's come from, the place that it's come from as well. It's really come from service to them and then service to the parents. And yeah, as I just said, activation, voice, creativity, and also magic, because I love magic as well. So
Yes.
it's got everything in it. Wow, what an amazing book. So my other question that I always ask all of our guests that come on here, and I have a very special interest in knowing, is what is your vision for a new paradigm of education?
Yes, I love this. And I've been reading, you know, lots of books about this and doing my own meditations and visualizations about this as well. And you know, it's no coincidence that we're all here talking about these different paradigms and levels and stuff. So I think definitely there has to be the element of, you know, spiritual development, personal development, and emotional well-being, you know, as well as the academics. Like, definitely, like, just even as the starting point, like that's the lowest level of consciousness, to just go, yeah, okay, those things have to be a given, right? We can't move forward without combining those things. So that's the first thing, which is why, you know, I talk about educating, empowering, and elevating the students. So that's the basis, that's the given. And then I think what, you know, what I would love to see is this oneness. You know, it's no surprise that we're both part of the Oneness Foundation. It's the fact that, you know, the young children who are coming through now, if we fast forward to when they're adults, when they're 30, we can imagine them sitting around in some kind of, you know, conversation where they're talking about, you know, how to eradicate the poverty in the world, how to make sure that the environment, you know, is protected and thriving, and that they see the world as their home. It's not over in Africa or over in the West or up in the East or whatever. The world is the home, the world is the global classroom, and we're all citizens, we're all part of that. And so whatever pain somebody's going through in another part of the world is also my pain. And I think that when we allow the children to be able to understand that, that is how we're going to change the world, right? And it probably sounds a bit cliche, but I've actually visualized this happening. And so I know it can be true. I know it is a reality. Whether we choose that, I don't know, but it's a reality that is possible. The other thing as well is, I think that we need to bring back in the power of the elders, right? Because that wisdom that is there, you know, and also the time for that connection with the young children. You know, I think so many families have become so separate. And if we were able to have like the Council of Elders back again to support and nourish our young people, so that the parents, while they're growing up, are still learning. We haven't got enough wisdom as parents, you know, we need the grandparents as well. And so I think that there can be more with that. There can be a greater kind of emphasis on that, this kind of Council of Elders, this oneness of understanding, you know, in a collaborative and a compassionate way, about the world's economy, about the world's finances, you know, all of that, food sources, everything like that. And the other thing, of course, which is absolutely crucial and which can be taught, you know, from a very young age, is self-regulation. And so what I think is Neil Donald Walsh talks about highly evolved beings, HEBs. And the difference between HEBs and the humans that are here now, the state we're in now, is that HEBs are very self-regulated, and they've got this idea of unity. And so, you know, the question is, well, why would you harm another person? Why would you do something to harm another person? Because that's actually harming yourself, you know. And so then there's no need for prisons, there's no need for laws, there's no need for police, there's no need for all of this, because everybody's regulating themselves at such a high level to be the highest possible version of themselves in any given moment in time, which is the beauty of the universe expressing itself in its highest version. That if everybody is conscious enough to do that in any given moment, that's actually the kind of epitome of perfection.
Yes, yes, yes.
Wow. I don't know how else to explain it.
It's amazing. It's a full-hearted answer. And how can you explain that? It's an evolution, and I really feel this is the paradigm. It's the evolution of us rising, as you're saying, to the highest good, serving from the highest good, serving from that place of community, non-separation, of giving, of love. And when you're in that state, that's all there is. And so it's easy to be able to have all of that. And so the stepping stones towards that is just doing little bits and pieces every day, isn't it? Just to help ourselves and help humanity, and whatever that is, you know. I really love your answer.
And I think, you know, with that stepping stone, and people say, well, you know, that sounds amazing, but what can I do? It's about being true to ourselves. It's about starting with that self-regulation. We don't have to change the world. We don't have to, you know, worry about, I mean, obviously people are aware of things, but we don't have to, you know, just think about your own unit, your own family unit, how you're showing up for your kids, how you're showing up for your partner, how you're showing up for yourself primarily. You know, are you being the highest possible version of yourself in any given moment? And if the answer is no, which for many of us it is no, why is that? Get into that curiosity. Why is that? Is it because you just don't know, right? Is it because you haven't got the clarity? Is it because you haven't got the awareness? In which case, go on the education journey and start taking that path and making those steps. And you'll be rewarded for that.
Yes. Ooh. Yes. Wow. So education is something that's coming from within us, and it's that place of learning, that place of recognition beyond any textbooks, beyond anything else. That's the key of this, right? And all this other stuff we're doing is supporting that, but coming back to that place, that's such a message. Thank you so much for coming on today, Claire. I've really, really enjoyed your wisdom, and you've got so much wisdom. I love that you can speak about academics, you can speak about the quantum, you can speak about your own journey as a teacher, as a parent. Like, there's just so much you offer. And if people are wanting to connect with you, how can they reach you?
Thank you so much. So the easiest place really is just to go to switchedonglobal.com. There's a tab there that says contact. You can send me an email, you can send me a message. You know, I'm on all the different social media platforms. Hop into my messenger or just email me from the website. That's the easiest way. I'm always up for a conversation, so don't be a stranger. I'd love to know how everybody's getting on, and look forward to speaking to people.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed speaking with you. And to all of our listeners, thank you so much for being a part of this journey with us, because by you listening and joining in this conversation of a new paradigm of education, we are truly helping to evolve education together. So thank you, everybody. Namaste.